Nadi Hamashak. Hello, I'm Patricia Norby, Associate Curator of Native American Art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art here in New York. I would like to acknowledge that as a woman of Purépecha descent, I am a guest here in Lenape-Hoking, ancestral lands of the Lenape people, and to the Indigenous peoples and communities, both past and present, who call this place home. I offer my deep respect and gratitude. I'm honored to be among such esteemed colleagues, and I would like to thank our three speakers and our audience members for joining us this evening. Tonight's program is part of the Met's ongoing work to foreground Native American and Indigenous voices and experiences in our Native American galleries, while honoring our commitment to pursuing continuous collaborations with Indigenous communities and to present Native American art in a manner that is inclusive of Indigenous perspectives, involves guidance from source communities, and creates a space for respectful listening and thoughtful dialogue. At the Met, we will continue to advance Native American and Indigenous perspectives in our exhibitions, collections, and programs. We will strengthen our awareness of historical contemporary environmental issues in the New York region and throughout North America in order to thoughtfully reckon with our institutional legacy and its impacts on the lands, waters, and original peoples of this place, which are and always will be inextricable. And now I'm thrilled to introduce our three presenters. Tonight, we celebrate three artists whose work and activism I truly admire and respect. All three of our speakers are artists, educators, and activists who generously shared their work in Art of Native America, the Charles and Valerie Diker collection, an exhibition which debuted in 2018 and is now officially a permanent installation in the American Wing, and Water Memories, an exhibition which highlights intimate connections between Indigenous artists and water. Tonight's program will consist of three artist presentations, followed by a brief discussion. I will introduce all three of our guests and then hand things over to them in order to spotlight their art and their voices. We'll be hearing first from Cara Romero, who is a member of the Chemeheuvi Indian tribe. Cara is a contemporary fine art photographer whose photograph you might recognize as the signature image for the Water Memories exhibition, which was selected as one of the top exhibitions of 2022 by the New York Times and Hyperallergic. Cara Romero's identity and community inform her photography into a blend of fine art and editorial styles that is shaped by years of study and an ethereal approach to representing Indigenous cultural memory, collective history, and lived experiences. Cara's expansive work collection takes on the role of storyteller, using diverse photography techniques to depict contemporary experiences of Native peoples, while foregrounding the dreamlike magic of everyday life. In addition to her artistic practice, Cara maintains a studio and gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and regularly participates in Native American art fairs, panel discussions, educational programs, and other important community events. Then we will hear from Cannupa Hanska Luger. Born on a Standing Rock Indian reservation in North Dakota, Cannupa is a New Mexico-based interdisciplinary artist whose community-focused works address environmental justice and issues of gender violence. Cannupa creates monumental installations, sculpture, and performance to communicate urgent stories about 21st century indigeneity. His work incorporates ceramics, steel, fiber, video, and repurposed materials to activate speculative fiction, engage land-based actions of repair through social collaboration. Cannupa combines critical cultural analysis with dedication and respect for diverse materials, environments, and communities, while provoking audiences to engage with Indigenous peoples and values apart from the lens of colonial social structuring. And finally, when he joins us, we will be hearing from Peter B. Jones. Peter B. Jones is a member of the Onondaga Nation. Returning to his homeland in 1977, after studies at the Institute of American Indian Art in Santa Fe, New Mexico, he has worked to bring Haudenosaunee pottery practices back to life in his home communities and is often credited with single-handedly reviving many of these aesthetic practices. His striking pots and clay sculptures reflect ancestral works made with clay and earth gathered from stream beds and modified with crushed shell, rock, and sand to create a clay body that is useful and durable after firing. Peter shares his knowledge in classes and workshops throughout Haudenosaunee country and demonstrates connectedness with community through teaching while foregrounding the legacy of Haudenosaunee pottery. And now I'd like to turn things over to our first speaker, Cara Romero.
Cara Romero Niega nu. I'm so honored to be here with all of you today. I'm zooming in from the lands of the Tewa, Tiwa, Toa, and Cara-speaking peoples in Ogopoge, the place of the white shell water, Santa Fe, New Mexico, the land of the Northern Pueblo people. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen and tell you a little bit about myself and my practice and how this idea of activism works through my art. So I was born in the 70s in the Los Angeles area to interracial parents. My dad is Chemeheuvi and my mom is German-Irish of the Beach Bunny clan of California. And in 1979, my whole family, grandparents, aunts and uncles, myself and my brother, my whole family moved back to the Chemeheuvi Valley Indian Reservation, which is in the heart of the Mojave Desert on the California side of Lake Havasu. It is the land of cholla cactus and ocotillos and is the second most biodiverse place in the world behind the rainforest. And it was a beautiful place to grow up. It was just 30 homes in the early 80s. The tribe had reorganized and just kind of a one-road town. So we lived there along the river in a pristine landscape that's still largely undeveloped on the California side of the Colorado River. We are mostly known as the greatest of the Great Basin basket weavers, and that is because underneath Lake Havasu was a riparian wetlands of cottonwood and willows where we gathered white willow to make the baskets that we're still known for today. And that practice is still going on with our youth and with our elders, although there are not very many basket weavers left. When I grew up, my grandmother was chairwoman of our tribe, and we have a great amount of gender equity where I'm from, in that often our governance is shared between both men and women, and often our tribal council can be even dominated by women. All of that to say, I grew up with kind of a unique experience in hindsight and in my perspective. That Chemeheuvi women are always taught that we're strong and that we're allowed to take up space and that we're every bit as capable of our counterparts. My parents split in the 80s, and I, from that point forward, had moved for public school into a majority minority public school in Houston, Texas. And it was the culture shock that you can probably imagine, but I spent the next 12 years going back and forth between Houston and the Chemeheuvi Valley Indian Reservation. And one of the things that I learned really early on was that dominant society or mainstream America really didn't have an understanding of contemporary issues of Native peoples, of reservation life, of the diversity of all of our stories. And I think many Native people go through school and they see and experience incredible paucity of representation in academia, in media, but have this lived experience of beauty and resilience and stories and storytelling tradition still being passed down through generations. And so from a very early age, I knew that I wanted to be an educator, that I wanted to be able to communicate our beauty, our lived experience, all of the struggles that we face, and all of the stories that I knew weren't being told anywhere that I could find. So I'll get right into a little bit of the body of the work. And I think it's really important for this particular conversation to discuss this idea of cultural landscape. And Patricia alluded to it earlier, this idea of our ontological ties to the land, truly our inseparableness from our landscapes. You'll often hear Native people talking about emergence of culture and of language from where their bones, where their DNA emerges from. And this is the Mojave Desert for myself and for Chemeheuvi people. We're from a landscape that's incredibly beautiful and very different from many places in the world, but it's a place that we're attached to. And like many other Native communities, have a deep respect for our landscape, for our creation stories, where we're from, and really this inseparableness of our bodies and the landscape. In Chemeheuvi mythos, all of the land is made from the body of great ocean woman. And so it is women from our tribe that have a special ability to commune with Mother Earth. I wanted to show this image, it's Jackrabbit and Cottontail, to give a little bit of context about what it is to be on the California side of the Colorado River. It really is the cradle of life of the Southwest, and our tribe, our reservation was withdrawn in 1907 on the California side of the Colorado River, and then later flooded to make present day Lake Havasu. Lake Havasu covers Chemeheuvi Valley completely, and our tribe inhabits 41 miles of the California waterfront of the river. It is a place and a water source that we are passionate about. It is a sense of home where we're from. We grew up fishing, swimming, actively involved and dependent upon our life source of the Colorado River. One of the things that I like to, visually talk about in my photography is the stories of colonization and the environmental impacts of the ongoing what I call resource extraction from Indigenous lands. These are stories that have happened over the last many centuries, where big industry of the United States and really globally takes from the backyard of people of color. And while Indigenous peoples are stewards of 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity, it is our lands that continue to be extracted from and corrupted in the name of big energy, whether it be oil in the Black Hills, gold, hydroelectric energy and damming of the rivers, to solar. The largest land grab in US history is happening right now in our Mojave Desert, in the name of renewable energy. And so I would like to spend a little bit of time with water memory. And I would like to go through the conception and talk a little bit more behind the scenes, which I don't often get to do. But this piece was really initially conceived of and inspired by several different incidences that happened to me in 2015. And I am very close friends and an admirer of Ariel Deranger. She is from Chippewa up in Alberta, and her tribe is adjacent to the Alberta tar sands. And she is a fierce activist, and executive director of Indigenous Climate Action. And she had described to me back in 2015 how their ice bridges were no longer staying frozen, and the impacts and the flooding that her tribe was experiencing. And not long after that description and that experience, I was in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I was under a freeway overpass in a botanical garden taking a tour. And underneath the freeway overpass, all of the columns that held up the bridgeway over us were painted with striations of beautiful blues that went up, quite high stories above our heads. And I asked the tour guide about this particular art installation that was under the overpass, and he said this is painted to visualize what it looks like when the water level raises 10 meters. And I think that was the moment where I had what I would consider a catastrophic fantasy, right, of the Great Flood, of that we would all be underwater. And this haunting image kind of stayed with me. And that's often how my work happens, is there is something that happens in the mind's eye and the idea stays with me and the content stays with me. And I then began to examine, what does this mean, or what could this mean? And I began to talk to many of my friends and family about flooding. And it was really not only in contemporary context that these stories of flooding that are happening, right, to Indigenous peoples, but we also have these historic occurrences of flooding. My tribe was flooded out of our ancestral valley, and in our oral traditions, we still talk about how people were being pulled out of their homesteads with inches of water on the floor by the Army Corps of Engineers, and that's in present day Lake Havasu. I spoke to friends that were being impacted today by flooding after the Las Conchas wildfires. So the image that became kind of the signature image of the series of water memories is Water Memory, and it features two Puebloan corn dancers in a mysterious deluge of water. For me, initially, this was a story about the flooding that was occurring after the Las Conchas wildfires. This piece, as art sometimes does, had a much greater impact than that initial idea that I had in making the piece. And so it became about really this idea of the power of water and this ability of Mother Earth to care for herself, to repair herself, and Indigenous worldview of how we're all going to be going back to Mother Earth as we are living in the age of the Anthropocene. So with that, I'd like to go through a few more slides and a few more ideas. This one features my friend and somebody I admire very much that's also on here, and that is Cannupa Hanska Luger. Cannupa and I discussed this, and his tribe, like ours, were flooded out of their ancestral homelands to make Lake Sacagawea. They ended up on a chunk of clay and they found oil. And I think that it's really important, these stories to be told, because people often wonder, why does that tribe live up on the mesa? Why do those Chemeheuvis live up on the mesa? Or why do the Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara live where they live? And when you don't tell the stories of how the lands were flooded and how they were taken, it's difficult to make the connection of why we're surviving on oil economy. The stories of flooding are numerous. This series could go on indefinitely. It's a subject that's important to me. This one refers to, it's called Evolvers, but it is a response to the renewable energy that's happening in the Mojave Desert. And while we embrace it as Indigenous peoples, it's also terrifying and frightening. And we hear terms like this is going into a vast and empty landscape, but these landscapes are often rich with Indigenous history. The washes in the desert are not empty. They're literally the tide pools of the desert. They're migratory paths. They're where the turtles burrow in the sides of the wash. And so it's a misconception to believe that these large energy projects are going into empty landscape without history. My photography tells stories of extraction of gold and oil along the coast of California. And it also counters the narratives and talks about the original mythos and stories of the land as places of creationism. My work also speaks to the importance of Indigenous science, of traditional ecological knowledge that it has been passed down through generations. Our regalia is deeply tied to the health of our landscape. From each of our different communities, our pine nut necklaces, our abalone belts, it all comes from a healthy landscape. And it has a deep connection with Indigenous worldview of reciprocity for the landscape. And without health of the landscape, our arts are in peril. And finally, this idea of protecting our Indigenous science isn't just about storytelling from the past, but it's about protecting these ideas of heirloom corn into the future as we're moving so rapidly towards the future of AI, of faster internet speeds, of all of the different possibilities of technology. Truly, our planet and our people will be nothing if we don't still have the ability to grow our heirloom corn and, pass down the original instructions of Native peoples. So really this idea that Native people, Indigenous science, traditional ecological knowledge is really has a sacred role in the balance and the healing of people and planet. And with that, I would like to stop sharing my screen and invite my friend and somebody I admire very much, Cannupa Hanska Luger, to take over. Thank you so much.
Luger, Dripping Earth Clan from Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara tribes. Thank you, Cara. That was amazing. I'm coming to you all here from, let's see, this is my studio, and I'm Tiwa Tewa Towa lands in Glorieta, New Mexico. I'm originally from North Dakota, an enrolled member of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara tribe. I was born on the Standing Rock Reservation, which is Hunkpapa, Lakota, but my family on my father's side is from Cheyenne River, Sioux tribes. So I live in New Mexico currently, and yeah, close proximity to Cara and many other people. And I think Cara touched on a few things that are these like unfortunate intersections of an Indigenous experience, which is the ongoing kind of like impact of extraction within communities, the impact of that on our capacity to maintain and move stories forward to survive those sorts of impacts, and find ways to thrive under those same kind of situations. She had mentioned that I'm from a tribe in North Dakota that was also flooded. 42% of our reservation is under Lake Sacagawea, and I think in that there was that kind of a long, like a generation or so, resentment towards the river. We're river people, so those relationships and those bonds are something that our current kind of communities have to address and are touching on, and finding reverence once again, and removing the animosity towards the river, where it was not the river's fault, but this like relationship to water and environment is really dependent on how we live and how we exist. A big part of my practice is evolving kind of myths and stories and maintaining stories that existed within our culture. These pieces here are like about our monster slayer stories, and address a few of the prophecies that we've engaged with from an ancestral kind of deep time relationship to our present. And in those stories, hold these kind of like information around what we should be afraid of, what is a threat to us, and how to combat that, address it, engage with it. And so all of these stories, I think, are really beautiful, but they don't get kind of shared outside of our communities. And so finding ways to kind of like extend those ideas is something that I'm always kind of fascinated with. I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to material. I have a background in ceramics, but have found kind of like other materials through access that better kind of describe some of the ideas that I wanted to present. And in that, a lot of it is using repurposed material, found objects, things that are readily available within my environment, and trying to bridge this kind of like space of an object-oriented art practice into an installation and or performance and or experience. And in doing so, you kind of have to adapt the environment of the museum or the gallery. These kind of like white walls that are literally constructed of this place. The materials that went into its construction are oftentimes of the land that we inhabit. And so questions of how do you sustain these kind of like ideas and cultures and narratives under the kind of overriding presence of colonialism and or the empirical nature of Western science, medicine, application of how it's educated through the academy, and the extension of that into museum. I like playing around with the idea of things being presented in ways from an anthropological lens outside of the context of the culture that it represents. This piece in particular is a nod to the compulsion to gather indigenous wares. So pottery, basically the utensils we would use to exist and to thrive, and then kind of blur those edges and re-present the detritus of the impact of Americana, the impact of industrialization, the impact of dominion. This piece is called The Ruin of Dominion. All of these kind of sculptural forms, what I found was that it invites the audience to kind of experience them in their world, in their reality. And I tend to talk less about what each piece means to me, kind of internally, culturally, specifically, and allow the objects to hold space and command space within the institution itself. The trick with sculptural forms is that they inhabit spaces that the audience can no longer inhabit. I feel as though there's kind of an implication of colonialism in the act of creating artwork that takes up space, that controls space, that allows only room for the object itself and not for anybody else to inhabit those spaces. So installing sculptures, working in sculpture, allowing sculptures to be kind of moved through the institution and inhabit institutional spaces is an act of reclaiming space. I didn't often think about that too deeply, and it also implicates myself in what I've experienced in the 21st century, this reinforced kind of narrative of control and dominion over land by placing things in its way. Oftentimes it's in industries with the kind of forward notion of it's for the greater good, but really it's about capital gain and control of space. We've lost a lot of land, not just indigenous people, but human beings in general across the globe, to these structures of power. That base kind of gain is capital. And what's the cost of that? I think when we're talking about capital, when we're talking about energy, we're talking about industry, and we're talking about all of these sorts of things, we understand the value of it. But I don't think we've completely comprehended the cost. The cost is too high. It's depleting the diversity of not just cultures, but also species. I don't like to think of myself as an activist simply because I know people who are activists, who do put their bodies on the front line, who are inhabiting space to do direct actions to reduce the impact of extractive industries, industrialization, capitalism, gentrification. And I think my role as an artist is to communicate some of these ideas and open up the possibility of options, to extend the mind's capacity to imagine something else, something other, something different, and to create more choices for us in the future, to decide what and how and where we want to invest in our futures. I think with limited choices, you make the choice that best suits you, or you make the choice that is perhaps easiest or cheapest. But that's understanding the value and not quite yet the cost. And I think cost is understood when you have a deep time relationship to place, when you can understand the radical change, the variations, the differences over a larger or longer comprehension of time. And I think that's very difficult for most citizens of the United States and most citizens of most nations across the globe, where they're suffering from displacement, where their relationship to place is based on what they can afford and not necessarily what those protocols of belonging are. So my work varies in its scope, but the concepts, I think, are rooted in some of the most basic customary practices of Indigenous people, which is how do you thrive in the place that you are? What are the protocols that make you a good relative to everything else in the environment that you inhabit, and the humility to ask when you don't know. I think this is an important aspect of Indigenous knowledge that's oftentimes overlooked when we're placed in positions of becoming avatars of the environment, people who are charged with the responsibility of stewardship. That stewardship does not fall on an individual. It falls on the culture. It falls on the people to make those sorts of choices. And I think my work is to slowly open up the opportunity to engage beyond the voyeuristic kind of aspects of what it means to participate in the world presently, and actually get involved and have the courage to ask when you don't know. I live in New Mexico. This is not the lands of my people. We are river people, like I said, and I live in the high desert. I live on the edge of a mesa at the top of a mountain range that is so different from the grasslands of my people and landscapes. And really, to understand how to live and survive and thrive here is about building relationships with folks who have those kind of deep time relationships to the environment. I say all of this, and I also, put forward the question of what do we want for our future? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine what it means to live in right relationship with the place that you are? And I think it also challenges some of the ideas around what it means to belong to the land, and or where your allegiances lie, whether that falls under flags and nations, or is it smaller than that? Is it directly the community that surrounds you? Is it the state that you live in, or the environment that you live in? And encourage people to ask themselves those very same questions, and know that there is information around what the protocols are to live and thrive in the environments that we inhabit. And I think it's also interesting because it touches on these notions of technology. A lot of my work is based in an Indigenous futurism, or a speculative fiction, to imagine something other, something else. And in that, there is an impulse to talk about technology. And more often than not, the limitations of the understanding of what technology is reduced to the mechanisms that we use presently. The whole tech industry that we buy into every day is not necessarily the technology. This is a mechanism. The technology is rooted in a much older idea, something that we've maybe forgotten what the actual technology is, and traded that for the latest and greatest mechanism to augment that technology. By and large, presently, we are really leaning into communication, and communication is the technology. The mechanisms that we've developed amplify that, but communication is a very old technology. It's older than human beings. It exists in the songs of birds, the chirps of insects. So older than that, I'm sure, deep in the ocean, signals of light. So I encourage people to kind of broaden their scope of what technology is, and enter into engaging with Indigenous populations and removing the scope of tech not being the mechanism, but the idea. A lot of Indigenous technology is not moved through mechanical systems, but rather ways of thinking, modes of thought, and protocols to participate collectively as a community, versus augmenting or amplifying self as an individual. So I would say that that's kind of the core and the basis of my practice, and I'm really excited to move on to Peter Jones and hear Peter's insights in this conversation. So at this point, I would like to pass it on to Peter, and thank you all, and hope to see you all later.
Oh, thank you. This is from a collection that I did for a PowerPoint that starts in 1963 or so and goes up until about 2014. Yeah, it's about 50 years of work. This is one of the first ceramic pieces I did, which is called Blue Head. And there's a wheel thrown and slab made pot. Piece I did when I was about 16 or 17 or 18, somewhere around there in high school. And it's become kind of iconic for a lot of the Institute of American Indian Arts publications. And it represents the red paint is instant Indian, which was happening in the 60s with hippies and everybody jumping on a bandwagon to be Indian. Next. This is my interpretation of the landscape of New Mexico, Mexico, #1. I was doing wheel thrown combined with slab method, making these totems and pots actually to represent where I was. And this is called Emergence. It's sort of like Sipapu, but in our tribe, we talk about the original people coming out of a cave and exploring the new world. This is one of my first traditional style pots. It's pit fired, has effigies on the rim and plating or geometric marks. This is the type of pottery we made prior to 1500. We lost a lot of knowledge about our pottery due to the Europeans coming over and bringing their trade goods, which replaced our original pottery. And I've been involved in bringing this style back because it represents something that we actually invented or was part of our life. I work in clay primarily, done a few bronzes, a few other things, but clay is my medium. And when we moved our villages, which we did about every 20 years, as we depleted the land, we would look for a new spot, and the new spot would have to have a clay supply and a water supply. Those were the two things that were life-sustaining for us. So clay even has a place in our stories about the clays being clan people. So it's an old method. This is a stoneware pot that is slab and wheel thrown with rawhide, and it's and little colored stones. It represents the sky with the lightning and things like that, because a lot of our stories are based on the sky dome. The original people fell from the sky. This is another one. It's called White Dog Feast, which is also rawhide and a pit-fired pot and a carved dog effigy on it. White Dog Feast is one of our 7 ceremonies that we do. We don't use an actual white dog anymore. This is a wheel thrown pot that I made in the traditional style with the 2 airplanes and the screaming man on each corner, representing the 9/11. And when I pit fired it, the clouds on the pot came out just the way I wanted them to, where it looks like when the building exploded and collapsed, the puffs of dust coming out of the ground from where it sat. And this pot kind of captured that. This is from a series called American Tragedies. And this is a sculpture of Bigfoot, the famous picture that's shown all the time. He was shot and wounded and left to die and freeze to death, actually, in the Battle of Bighorn. And this is a contemporary stoneware piece that kind of replicates Bigfoot. Only he has a alcohol bottle in his hand, but I tried to give it some hope where you can't really tell whether he's going down or getting up. So yeah, he's American tragedy too. This piece is done with in white clay and represents the American native entrepreneur. And he's looking for customers, and he has the gas nozzle in his hand. One of our reservation has had gas stations for a long time, gas and cigarettes. Was our main economy until casinos. This is Turtle Island, and he has a radioactive sign on it, and then the television screen depicting the story of Sky Woman falling from the sky world, and the geese breaking her fall and bringing her down. Man trying to climb out from underneath. This is the black thing is a slot machine with an airplane crashing into it. This is Quantum Indian on here. It says 1/4, 1/2, 3/8, whatever. This is a very early piece in the 90s. It's called Sovereign Indian, and his hands are bound because we're only as sovereign as the government allows us to be. This is a head that has binary symbols on it and different words can, this is 2000, I think it was 2000 I made this. But there's another picture of it somewhere. Yeah, Indigenous, 1492 to 2002. And the X on his forehead is a termination mark. You put X's on trees. They're going to cut them down. This is a piece I did in the 90s. It's Horns of a Dilemma, and it's represents the casino slot machine. And here we have corn, beans, and squash on the front. Dollar bills for his castoet. And castoet is the traditional headdress of our tribe. And instead of the horns of the chiefs, these are gas nozzles. And I think there's another one that shows the other side. It's called High Stakes. This is when we were trying to decide, the tribe here was trying to decide whether or not to go into casinos. But on this button here is another thing. This is called Dialogue on Sovereignty, and it shows the native person back to back with Uncle Sam. And that's how we discuss sovereignty with the government. It's the other side. The American flag is on the bottom because the 2-row wampum in the blue, and then the George Washington Covenant belt came before the flag. And this one is, what is he called? Indian with baggage. And his baggage is the flag, alcohol, cigarettes, all of this stickers on here for Wounded Knee, different places. This is Totadahu, who is the chief of the Six Nations, and his problems are gas nozzles, gas stations, money, and he's got a necklace of cigarettes around his neck. Most of these pieces are activism pieces. They call attention to some of the problems that we've been having and have. And rather than protest publicly, I choose to create sculptures and pieces that depict what we're going through, whatever the present time is. I haven't run out of ideas yet. This is a street chief. He's one of those guys that sits on the street with his friends and they talk about old times with a bottle of wine, bum a cigarette. This is American Liberty. He has the wampum belts. This is Sky Woman Falls to Earth. And it's a waitress dressed in kind of a faux Indian type thing, but she's tripping on the Turtle Island This is called Red Moon. It's a combination of different materials, beads, rawhide. It's called New Indian. And when our tribe uses horns to depict the chiefs, and you can see here that horns are muted or mutated. And the feathers are different. He has an iPod stuck in his ear, which became a problem for a while with the meetings we were having. The phones would ring and things, people that had to leave the meeting to go answer their phones. So the new world caught up with us. It's called Yellow Man, and it represents the end times when there will be a disease that is incurable. And it sounds a lot like, I don't know, everyone will turn yellow, which sounds a lot like a liver disease. But this went along with the series I did on the end times prophecy. These are also from the end times prophecy. They say that there will be a yellow and a blue, a red ball in the sky. And when they touch the earth, that's when the end will be. And these are the true believers. They're buried now, but when the end times come, if they're true believers, they will be woken up and be in another world. And these are also part of the prophecy. There will be men and women wandering aimlessly, not knowing where to go and fighting with each other, and had no idea what's going on. There would just be complete collapse. This is a piece that's now in the 9/11 Museum, and it's called post 9/11. There's various things on there. It relates to when they shot Gaddafi and the drones flying over the earth and the nuclear chimneys that are dotting the United States. This is another view. He has little bombs on him, actually. This is a current take on our old pottery. It's kind of basically the same shape, but I'm using it to tell a story of Sky Woman falling in a different way. And it's a stoneware piece. This is the same piece on the other side. You have the people coming out. This piece is probably 2 feet. This is another one that's a different message on it. That's it. And I think that's about it on my career there. I have another 30 years probably of pictures and slides that depict my career.
Thank you, Peter. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, again. Cara and Cannupa, all three of you. It's just really incredible to see how your work resonates across materials, across subject matter, and just all the intersections between the three of you. What I want to say, because we're over time, and I want to leave our audience, our members, our guests with one final question and statement from all of you. What I want to say is your art, so many people look up to all three of you. Your work impacts so many people. And so what I want to say is your art, your stories, your experiences sustain our Indigenous communities. And although you might not see yourselves as activists, in Cannupa's case, specifically, for so many of us, you are. You help to represent our voices. And so I want to ask all three of you if you could just respond briefly to this one question, and that is, we are in such an environmentally fragile time. We all know this. And many of our communities have talked about this time for many years, that it was a long time coming and we needed to be ready. So I want to ask all three of you, what is one thing that you hope or imagine for future generations?
I hope that our children and younger people eventually will take up the old ways in the way that they were meant to. If we had followed them in the first place, we wouldn't be in this mess. It's something that gets lost with the cell phones and all of the technology we have today. And I don't see anyone walking in the woods or anything like that. When I was growing up, that was our only way to entertain ourselves.
Thank you, Peter. Cara, how about you?
I mean, I really have to agree with Peter. I'm a mother of three, and I think about their future a lot. And I echo Peter in the sense of this digital world and the disconnect that our children are facing, disconnect from nature, disconnect from cultural transmission, communication between generations, communication with the landscapes that they're from. There's so many people doing really good work in Native communities to protect, to protect the lifeways, but it's really going to take everyone uplifting Indigenous voice and, getting back to place-based ways, of elevating the understanding that Native peoples have with their environments as a better way to live, right? We're going to all have to change the way that we live in order for the good things to survive. And we really need to do that for our children and take a pause on how quickly we're moving with technology and disconnecting from the things that are really important. So I hope my children are able to do that. And I hope that I'm able to teach my grandchildren all the things that my grandparents taught me.
Thank you, Cara. Cannupa?
Things that I imagine for the future or hope for the future. I guess I also agree with both Peter and Cara. This disconnection is a problem. I think it's really important that we learn to trust each other again. I know I carry a lot of distrust, and I hope for my children that they can trust whoever it is in their community, and not my whole life, from 1979 to present, there's these reinforced narratives through the media that we consume that reinforce these threats against us, body and then you see the systemic society we navigate reinforce those things. So I'm really interested in how we develop a strong kinship with one another, and use that as a precursor or model to strengthen that kinship between ourselves and the places that we inhabit. life has agency, and that these kinships just kind of like bolster a stronger relationship to place, to environment, to one another. I would love for my children not to live their entire lives as I have, like at war, in one way or another. My entire life, there's been conflict, and not to say that conflict doesn't happen, but I think our removal from even the conflict itself and the creating an illusion of who your enemy is based mostly on our displacement, based mostly on our lack of kinship with one another and our inability to imagine that we need each other, and we will need each other far into the future. And the better those relationships are, the broader that each other becomes. Hopefully, I don't know. We'll see.
Thank you, Cannupa. Before I ask my last question, I want to say to all three of you that as an Indigenous woman and as an Indigenous curator, I want to express how much I appreciate all of you and your amazing work and what you do on a daily basis to help to carry Indigenous voices and experiences forward. And how much I appreciate your contributions to both Art of Native America and Water Memories. Without the three of you, those shows would not be what they are. And so I want to thank you. And I also want to ask my final question, which so many people, we asked a number of people to submit questions. And one thing they asked that they wanted to hear from all three of you is, what is one thing that inspires you or sustains you on a daily basis?
The people themselves. I live on a reservation, so it's a daily thing to see other natives and going through the same thing that I went through when I was younger, and trying to help them get through that. And it's just a constant push to change. It's hard to change when everything seems to be against you. And that includes the federal government, state government, all of the governments, and even losing our perspective. They have a thing called the original what is it, that everyone is supposed to follow, and hardly anybody does. They can recite it, they can talk about it, but they don't live it. And that would make a very big difference. We have the knowledge to change, we have the knowledge to survive, we have all of this stuff that we need to get out there again. And there's a lot of people that don't subscribe to putting these things on tape or language or stories and all of this stuff. But it is the way that it's saved in these days. Yeah. When the language was dying, it was art that told the stories. And now the language is coming back, so the art should come back too. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Cara?
That's a really great question, and I had to think about it really fast. But I think that I'm really inspired by the elders that I grew up with on a daily basis that kind of give me a guiding compass of, how to be a good person, how to walk in this world in a good way. I'm incredibly inspired by my children. I think children have such a gift for teaching, in just being themselves and putting all of the ideas that they experience together, and how they interpret those things are so unique and uncorrupted. My son is a singer and he doesn't get nervous before he performs, and his dad asked him, how is it that you're not nervous? And he said, oh, I'm just a star being visiting this earth for a short time. I can't tell you how much that's inspired me in the last month since I've heard it. I'm deeply inspired by artists and people that are living in this life kindly and vulnerably, allowing their innermost person and heart to be out there in the world, accessible. And I think a lot of artists do that. So I'm deeply inspired by people that are true to themselves and vulnerable and accessible for other human beings.
Thank you, Cara. Cannupa?
Yes. Yes, agreed to both of you. I think all of that is total inspiration, I never have like an inspiration problem, honestly. It's probably half because we're inundated with so much information presently that there's always something to respond to. But I do give thanks to the struggle, it's interesting. The nobody ever said it was supposed to be easy, life has its difficulties. It's abrasive, if nothing else, and I think the better you understand that this is a gift, as well as a trial, it allots for me the capacity to adapt to those restraints, and I think that's been incredibly helpful. I don't know what I would do if I could do anything I wanted to do, but within the limits of what I can do, I get really excited about how I can try to do more, how I can try to eke out some sort of inspiration for anybody else through this kind of visual language of art, yeah, I think that's the extent of my inspiration note.
Well, I want to say again, thank you to all three of you. You and your work inspire me as an Indigenous woman and as a Native arts curator. And I take it very seriously that an important part of my role, my responsibility, is foregrounding Native American and Indigenous voices at the Met. And I just want to thank all three of you for helping me to do that today. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That concludes our program for this evening. Thank you for joining us.